GDP measures the monetary value of final goods and services, that is, those bought by the final users produced in a country in a given period. That's, of course, running for a year. The impressive GDP growth in Zimbabwe is largely attributed to improved coverage of economic activities, reflecting the inclusion of a greater number of business entities that have emerged since 2019, the previous base year. This is according to Treasury Chief Professor Mthuli Ncube. This expansion, which reflects the findings of the economic census by Zimstat, signifies a revitalized and more dynamic economy, resonating with the government's ongoing efforts to foster a conducive environment for business growth. Now, according to Zimstat, the new GDP figures have resulted in an improved gross national income, which increased from 2,259 to 2,859, beg your pardon, in 2023, from the projected 2,228 to 2,893 in 2024. Per capita income is projected to surpass $3,000 in 2025. Zimbabwe is therefore evidently making progress toward upper middle income status. That's according to Zimstat as well as according to the Treasury Chief. And our discussion tonight is Zimbabwe's economic growth, the facts. To explore these issues and more, I'm joined in studio by Moses Chihuri, Corporate Executive at the SPAR Group, Gladys Mutsoposi Shumbambiri, an economist, and we're also joined via the phone by Persistence Gwanyanya, Monetary Policy Committee member at the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Chase.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Fantastic. Now, please note that the views expressed on The Chase are those of our guests and do not reflect the views of Zim Papers Limited, 1980, or those of ZTN Prime. For perspective, now let's take a look at a statement that was issued by the Chief of Treasury in the capacity of the Minister of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion, Professor Mthuli Ncube, at a recent Cabinet briefing. Let's take a look.
Now, Cabinet has approved new figures from the latest economic census, which shows Zimbabwe's GDP for 2023 has been revised upwards to 168.5 trillion Zimbabwean gold, about $44.4 billion from an earlier estimate of $35.2 billion. The increase is mainly due to improved coverage of new business that emerged since 2019. Now, as a result, gross national income has also risen, with per capita income now projected to surpass $3,000 in 2025, moving the country closer to its goal of attaining upper middle income status.
So in terms of the fiscal framework, we now have obviously a new GDP base figure for 2024 at 45.7 billion, which is up from the 44.5 billion in 2023, which is actually the base year. So that's the first figure. It's just the GDP figure has gone up, and that's what we'll report in the midterm review at the end of the month. So secondly, it's now the GDP per capita, but also GNI per capita as well. So both of those are now firmly above the $3,000 per capita per person, and that's good progress towards the 2030 upper middle income agenda. That means that now we're firmly middle income, but right in the middle of the lower income scale. For to be upper income, we have to hit a GNI per capita of 4,500, and we'll get there.
Well, of course, that was Professor Mthuli Ncube, Zimbabwe's Minister of Finance. And of course, we are having this conversation to interrogate these figures with, of course, a capable panel of experts. Now, I'll start with you, Mr. Persistence Gwanyanya, who joins us telephonically. Zimbabwe has recorded what appears to be a doubled economic size, now valued at 44.4 billion United States dollars, and yet about 2-3 years back we were sitting at about 22 billion United States dollars. Question would be, is this the reality on the ground?
Thank you. So the results you're talking about are coming as a result of economic census that was recently concluded by Zimbabwe'S. In terms of that census, we are essentially changing the reference year, which is used to base our national statistics from 2019 to 2023. This is important against the background of the changes that occurred to the economy from 2019 to that. These changes have warranted the census, and which census have demonstrated that the economy has indeed shifted. It has shifted in the sense that the national statistics, especially GDP, has significantly increased to 44.7 billion, which is about 8 to 10 billion thereabouts increase in the GDP of the country. And this is a result of the inclusion of the previously excluded sectors or parties or players in the economy. Now, on account of wide coverage of the GDP occasioned by the census itself, we have seen the growth in the economy. This corroborates with what we already know, that our economy has grown up to become more informal. And there's quite a lot of activities that are happening in the informal sector. It also corroborates with the numbers that were coming from the likes of IMF, specifically IMF, which had estimated our economy at around 47 billion. We are estimating it at around 45 billion now, which means still compared to IMF, we are still slightly lower in terms of the GDP estimates, but significantly higher than the previous estimates, which put our economy at around 35.2 billion. So the national statistics have essentially changed to reflect the new structure of the economy. The new structure being that the economy has now grown up to become more informal. And that is important for policymakers to do that census. And I'm sure the Zimbabwe'S is not yet done because the 2023 base that I'm talking about might not be the most appropriate base on account of the major developments or volatility that we experienced in 2023. 2025 would probably be the best given that it's a more stable environment in 2025. But essentially, and in summary, the new numbers are reflecting the shift in our economy. And we need to be more realistic about where the economy has shifted to. So our policies are also more realistic and effective.
Relay that question to the very studio to say, it seems that there is an indication from a statistical perspective, even as Mr. Gwanyanya buttresses. Now, my question here to you, Mr. Ichihuri, would be, is this growth translating to its physical equivalents on the ground or not?
Thank you, Ben. I would like to comment on the issue of growth. I think the theoretical aspect of GDP growth should be equated to reality, what's happening on the ground. Right now, if you look at the capacity to spend from the customers, from the consumers, it's decreasing. So we might need to relook at the maybe the sample that was taken. Does it reflect those people who are on the ground, especially the informal sector? I personally believe that there are some people, there are some economic players who were not included in the sample. And if they were included, maybe we could have a fairer representation of what is happening on the ground. But reality on the ground now, if you are saying the GDP per capita is now like $3,000, we should be having a lot of rich people in this country. But in reality, it's the opposite. So maybe we might need to relook at the sample that was taken, the census that was done, so that we can have a quite informed position that can help the authorities when they are crafting their policies, especially on the GDP per capita. But in practice or in reality, they seem to be a mismatch of what's obtaining from statistical agency and what's happening on the ground.
Well, I'll relay the same question to you.
Thank you very much, Iban. I believe that this increase in the GDP growth, as Persistence has said, is reflective to some extent of the growth that is actually happening in the economy. If you look in the period between 2019 and 2024, we have seen growth in the informal sector. And there has been a lot of exclusion of the informal sector in terms of data and analysis and the statistics. So the inclusion of these informal traders or informal players in this economic census that was done by Zimstat is a positive movement towards inclusion, economic inclusion of these informal players, which is an indication because according to statistics, we have almost, informal sector is about over 70%. Our economy has shifted. So I believe that this statistic is reflective of the fact that the informal sector is now a significant contributor to the GDP growth. So the inclusion of these players, which were previously excluded, is an indication of where our economy is going. And this is also going to inform economic planning, which we call evidence-based economic planning, because then there is now evidence that the informal sector has some contribution, that it is contributing towards GDP, and hence it will also inform government policy, which is also going to enhance economic growth going forward.
Let's interrogate the numbers further. 3,000 United States dollars persistence. 3,000 United States dollars is the average income for Zimbabweans according to the statistics and according to projections. In fact, projections are suggesting that that figure should go beyond 3,000 by the conclusion of 2025. Is that factual, or these are figures that are just being plucked out of somewhere? Is that the reality obtaining on the ground, persistence?
Thank you. So the question relating to the GDP average, which is per capita income, looks at the average in its original sense. But this average does not take into account the disparities in income. So whilst the average could be that at those levels, but income could be unequally distributed, which could be a challenge that we're facing as an economy. So which is one of the traditional limitations of GDP, as a statistic because it doesn't take into account the inequalities in the distribution of the income. So admittedly, there is still some inequalities in the economy in that the few rich individuals and corporates seem to distort the picture from GDP statistics. Yes, we accept that, but also other limitations of GDP as they relate to our situation here in Zimbabwe. But all we are saying is the GDP of the economy has shown an increase following the census. But obviously, as it increased, you also want to go deep into the color of the numbers to say, yes, it has increased, but at the same time, we've also seen increased inequalities in the income. At the same time, we've also seen these negative externalities increasing in the economy, which affect the welfare of an average Zimbabwean. That's an additional discussion, further discussion that we can do. But I think at the moment, the key focus is on the GDP itself, that it has gone up, and what policy recommendations can be proffered to the policymakers.
I'll relay the same question to you, Gladys. $3,000 is the average income for Zimbabweans. Is that real? Is that the situation obtaining on the ground?
I believe that it is not a realistic figure looking at what is obtaining on the ground. If you really want to look at the average Zimbabwean, even in the formal sector, those that are employed, their average salary is like $400 or even below that. So to say $3,000 is the GNI per capita for an average Zimbabwean, we are already creating a high level of income disparities in the country, which is also going to cause serious problems even for the policymakers. So I believe that also looking at the consumer spending power of the average consumer in Zimbabwe, it has actually gone down. By having 3,000, we are saying, in other words, the consumer spending power should be higher. But if we look at the consumer spending power in Zimbabwe right now, it is actually reduced. So we also need to look at issues of the quality of life, the living standards of the people. Are they increasing? We are saying 3,000. That's far-fetched. Looking at the average standards of living of a general Zimbabwean who is living in the urban areas, the living standards, they are not that high. 3,000, for me, it would be far-fetched to say that's the GNP per capita for an average Zimbabwean. And also looking at the level of retrenchments that have happened in 2025, that would also not be real in 2025.
Right, we take a quick break and the chase will be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Harare, tune into the beat.
Capitalk 100.4 FM, your source for news, business, sports, fashion, and more.
Experience the pulse of Harare's culture and lifestyle.
Capitalk 100.4 FM, Harare's top radio station.
Join the conversation with Zimbabwe's top personalities.
Subscribe now for fresh and infotainment content daily.
Capital 100.4 FM, Harare's heartbeat.
Didn't graduate? I guess I blew it.
You couldn't advise him anything. He would just look at you and say,
So who do you think you are?
We were just like really spoilt.
And then they just give me the receipt and I'd pay.
The guy walks in one day and then he says that he wants to make a movie.
He was blowing the money.
There was just like this habit that he had where as soon as he got money, it was gone.
I just didn't have the skills or the experience.
This money, I could see it disappear so fast.
Catch exclusive interviews every weekday for candid, exciting, and thought-provoking conversations with your host, Erika Ndoro.
We talk about arts, we can talk about sports, we can even talk about politics, and sometimes we venture into a nice guitaristic play. The one story where you can't get out of your head.
Wakatarisa munhu so Erika like where you are sitting. Ndozongokona bata face so pasina munhu.
Wakasiya music yako iyo afro chakuti ndo music manje no Zimbabwe.
And I'm sure they're still saying the same thing now.
Yeah, so
Shona kana kuti chindevere kana mumwe mutaure muno muZimbabwe ndiwe iwewe ndiwo rupawo rwako ndicho chidadiso chako.
Catch me, Erika Ndoro, right here on ZTN Prime every single Monday at 7 p.m. whilst we get exclusive.
Captain Wally J is about to take you to boot camp.
It's the riveting science and tech show that keeps you up to date with the hottest gizmos on the block and revealing the illustrious and innovative visionaries in Zimbabwe. So much to see, you'll keep swiping.
This cherry red beauty is the Dairy Auto M7 mini electric car.
They've designed our brute force incubator board.
Look at what we've got here.
Solar powered scarecrow was part of the project that I was supposed to complete.
Catch Swipe every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. on ZTN Prime, DSTV channel 294. Get the picture? Dental checkups, experiments, games.
The mixture is making bubbles and the bubbles have changed color. Our balloon has been filled by carbon dioxide.
We have it all right here on Happy Sprouts. Catch us exclusively on ZTN Prime, DSTV channel 294. In a world where music transcends boundaries, where rhythm and melody unite the hearts of people, comes a show that celebrates the power of music like never before. Get ready to dive into a sonic journey that will leave you mesmerized and yearning for more. Welcome to the captivating world of Z-Vibes. Vibe to it, baby.
Harare. Tune into the beat.
Capitalk 100.4 FM, your source for news, business, sports, fashion, and more.
Experience the pulse of Harare's culture and lifestyle.
Capitalk 100.4 FM, Harare's top radio station.
Join the conversation with Zimbabwe's top personalities.
Subscribe now for fresh and infotainment content daily.
Capital 100.4 FM, Harare's heartbeat.
Welcome back to The Chase, Zimbabwe's premier current affairs program. I'm Eben Mabunda. We are continuing with the conversation on Zimbabwe's economic growth, the facts. Now, I'm still in conversation with Gladys Mutsopotsi Shumbambiri, an economist, Moses Shuhuri, corporate executive at the SPA Group, as well as now in studio. Previously, he was joining us telephonically, but now he's now in the studio. Persistence Gwanyanya, Monetary Policy Committee member with the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. Now, picking up from where we left off, you were about to weigh in, Mr. Chuhuri, on the subject of the 3,000 and whether the 3,000 is factual or fictional.
All right, I think our good friend here, Persistent, has captured it well when he said the limitations of how we measure the GDP. Is it representative, the sample that was taken, or we looked at the higher end of the market, people of means? But if we are to look at an average person in the country, the biggest employer in the country is the government. So that is a very good example. If you are to look at the average employee from the government, maybe they are earning $300, $400. So that could be a limitation. But that doesn't necessarily discount whether the income per capita is correct or is not correct. It might boil down to the issue of how representative the sample was. But if you are to look at the people on the ground, an average person in Zimbabwe is not earning $3,000. If we are to earn $3,000, we'll be very, very rich. And maybe as a limitation, if I'm a president, I'm told our income per capita now is 3,000, I'll be smiling to say, you know what, guys, my population is now very rich. So there seems to be a bit of a disparity between what is obtaining on the ground and what the figures from the statistical agents are saying. So we might need to find a way of finding a balance between the limitations of the measurement of GDP and reality on the ground so that it can influence policymakers.
Right. Persistence, when you look at the wages that are obtaining in the country, they remain pretty much stagnant. And you look at the average life of an individual, given the context of even the medical concerns that are in the country and the general state of affairs of an average individual, be it in the rural area or even in the urban area, there hasn't been much progress to show for the movement that these statistics seem to be suggesting. Why is that?
Thank you. Admittedly, we are not at where we would have wanted to be as an economy.
And yet we're at 3,000.
Zimbabwe has always regarded itself traditionally as a more privileged and advanced economy. So even if you compare with other peers, regional peers, Zambia, etc., we could be doing far much more better than those, but that's not where we want to be as Zimbabwe. We have always had the tendency of wanting to compare ourselves with the likes of South Africa and other countries in that league. But your question in terms of whether 3,000 US dollar plus is what would satisfy an average Zimbabwean, I think because of the reason I've mentioned, clearly we are more ambitious than that number. But obviously it also doesn't discount the fact that the quality of life, the welfare of the people is dependent on not only these numbers, like I've indicated. There are also other qualitative issues that comes into these numbers, which speaks to the quality of an average Zimbabwean. Yes, we might be higher than our regional peers, but if you look at the stability in the economy, for example, in the past, you could have advanced in terms of the growth or in terms of the GDP, but if there are volatilities elsewhere in the economy, a volatile economy, it then affects the quality of life because you are always busy with something, chasing something as a country.
But we are now improving in that area, which is quite comforting, and which gives us hope of improved quality of life going into the future. There are also other non-qualitative issues that still concerns us as in the economy, in the social space, maybe in the political space, maybe in the environmental space. So yes, we have advanced, but that's not where we would have wanted to be as a typical Zimbabwean. We have always regarded himself as ahead of others. Yes, we might have progressed in terms of the numbers, but there are also other issues that we now need to work on, which are qualitative in nature, which dictates the overall welfare of our citizens.
Right. I will relay this question to you, Gladys, to say the report seems to suggest business growth and the emergence of new enterprises. And yet this is coming at a point where we have witnessed business closures of established entities in our country. Truworths is currently undergoing corporate rescue, to cite one among several others. We saw a good number. Bindura Nickel Corporation last year went into corporate rescue. I could go on and on, but my question then would be, given the closures that we're witnessing and the corporate rescues that are happening to established enterprises in the country, and yet the report is speaking of growth. You mentioned the retrenchments that are taking place across industries. How do we rebalance the growth vis-a-vis the retrenchments as well as the closures that are obtaining in the economy?
Thank you very much, Iban. As I mentioned earlier about the growth in the informal sector, we are realizing that even the formally employed people now are registering side businesses, which we are calling side hustles. And these businesses were also previously excluded from the calculation in the GDP. So in my view, I believe that looking just at that informalization, there is business growth. If we look at the informal sector, if you go to Mbare Musika, for example, you can see that there is a lot of circulation of cash in Mbare Musika. There is a lot of economic activity. So I believe that the informal sector, if you look at the side of the informal sector, there is an element of business growth. Formerly employed people in the past used to look down upon establishing a small business. They thought that if you start a small business, it means that things are not going well for you. But there is also now a mindset shift amongst the Zimbabweans. Now they see the value of having your own business because retrenchments and job loss is now a reality. You are talking about these companies that are experiencing corporate rescue. So these are realities that are obtaining on the ground, which is also now opening up the minds and eyes of the Zimbabweans. They now see the value of being in business, and we are seeing an increase and growth in the informal sector. So if you are looking from the side of the informal sector, there is an element of business growth in Zimbabwe.
Right. You, of course, are in the retail aspect of the economy, which has been under threat, as some quarters of the economy would put it, from the informal sector. You've got tuck shops here, you've got tuck shops there, and there seems to be what appears to be a cannibalization of the formal by the informal. To what extent does that warrant the growth figures that seem to be projected by Zimstat and by Treasury?
All right, thank you, Eben. I think we need to first of all define what do we call formal, what do we call informal.
Right.
I would argue to say we need to set aside the word informal. By being small doesn't mean I'm informal, right? I could be running a tuck shop which is registered by the laws, under the laws of Zimbabwe, and I'll be paying my taxes. Can we really say that person is informal? So maybe what I would say, we need to really say this small enterprise is a formal small business, not an informal. But at the moment, for instance, at home, the moment you call a child an errand child, at the end of the day, you behave as such. We need to call these people small, formal businesses so that we create an environment where these people can also thrive. Right now, these guys, we need to agree, guys, the big retailers or the few big retailers, that space is gone. We now have got smaller retailers. If you look at Harare as an example, we have got a lot of people who are running their small tuck shops, who are running their small businesses, right? Should we continue to mourn to say, you know what, I wish we had Greater Men's, I wish we had Babas, I wish we had Clicks. Those guys are no longer there. We now have got Mr. Banda, we now have got Mr. Chihuri, we now have got Mr. Gwanyanya. These are the people who are there. So the policies that are going to be crafted should be targeted toward these people so that the growth is there. Surely if you go to downtown, there's a lot of economic activity happening there. If you go there, you see truckloads and truckloads of products coming from our local manufacturers. So what we need to do now is to craft policies that can actually help these guys to grow. Right now, I think we have got more of a legalistic approach where we force everyone, you must perform, you must perform. We need to find a way where we can encourage people to join the bandwagon. They should see the benefit of them joining the mainstream economy. If we take a legalistic approach, what do? They decide to go underground. So to answer your question, surely there's a lot of economic activity happening. If you go to Mbari, if you go to Siaso, if you go to Glenview, as an example, you'll be shocked to see the type of furniture which is being made in Glenview. But what have we done to make sure that Mr. Stolle, who is in Glenview, he can actually say, you know what, I've made two sets of sofas, I've made $1. I'm supposed to be making 20 cents as my profit, therefore I should be paying X amount to Zimra. But because we've taken a legalistic approach, Mr. Stolle in Glenview, he doesn't see a reason why he should walk to Zimra. So there's a lot of economic activity happening and there's growth in that space.
Right. I will come to you, Central Bank persistence to say there remain some macroeconomic issues that Zimbabwe needs to address. You look at, of course, the issue of the currency. There's been some stability that's been enjoyed over the past few months, but not to forget that we saw a currency depreciation, some would call it a devaluation. It could be an issue of semantics. That's in September of 2024, where we saw a loss of value of over 40% in the month of September. Now, these are issues that continue to dog Zimbabwe, much as their efforts to try and rectify some of those issues. You've got the inflation, which remains, again, another cause of concern where Zimbabwe's macroeconomic waters are concerned. And you've also got issues of course, the parallel market rate, which, of course, has waned from highs of 60, 70 last year to a region of about 20%. Now, against this very backdrop, the question then would be, how sustainable would be the growth that seems to be communicated by the authorities, as it were?
Thank you. I think there is consensus that the economy has generally been stable over the last year or so, despite the brief period that you have mentioned. And this seems to be inspiring some confidence as it relates to stability in the economy today and going forward. Clearly, this is a break from the past. And what we are seeing is a situation, as we read the situation on the ground, of permanent stability going forward. But we don't also want to forget the background we're coming from, which means there will be a lot of work that monetary authorities have to do to deal with the psychology of the past. So there's a lot of work. It's a structural issue. We understand that. But as regards the progress we have made so far, it's fair to give credit to the authority that we have made significant progress. And this inflation, this stability, is what I see as key today in affecting all other macroeconomic indicators in the country. We interact with volatilities every day. We interact with inflation, we interact with currency depreciation every day. So if those are managed, they are expected to also have some multiplier effects, accelerator effects in the economy. We are looking here at a situation we hoping for sustained growth, especially given the increased incidences of external factors in the economy. We see stability as a precondition for sustained growth. And now that we have achieved some measure of stability, we can now confidently talk about sustained growth as long as we work on all those issues that are needed to increase to reduce the country's exposure to the external factors. Like in the last budget, the Minister of Finance was more centered on the building of resilience in the economy. So as we build the resilience in the economy supported with a stable environment, we see ourselves progressing well towards sustained growth and also progressing well towards the vision 2030, which is the upper middle income class and which speaks to the welfare of the economy. But as we talk, we must also remember to deal with those other issues that are qualitative in nature that would affect the quality of life going forward.
Right, where of course that is concerned, there would now be the subject of how perhaps the macroeconomic framework can be reinforced. I would ask ladies as well as to you, Moses, with regards to the current state of affairs, the exchange rate regime that we've got in place. The International Monetary Fund in their Article 4 mission for Zimbabwe did make some recommendations to say that Zimbabwe needs to move toward a more liberalized means of going about its foreign exchange regime and all these issues that need to be tended to from a macro perspective. May you speak to that, ladies?
Thank you very, very much. As Persistence was talking about, we need to deal with the psychological issues of the past. Some of the psychological issues include the confidence in the economic policies. So my response would be that the authorities, they need to instill confidence in the transacting public. They need to instill confidence so that people, they know that we have, number one, currency stability. We also speak to exchange rate stability. It will be very, very important to enhance the growth that we are talking about. As we have indicated that the IMF has recommended a liberal exchange rate system which is market determined. So it will be important for the government to ensure that there is exchange rate stability. And also, since we have Mr. Gwanyanya here from the Monetary Policy Committee, it will also be important for the central bank to ensure that there is also financial sector stability. And there is also confidence, because growth also comes from people transacting through the formal channels, which is banking their money. A lot of people from the CSO, they don't use the formal banking system, and yet the banking system is a vehicle which will enhance the business growth that we are talking about. So these issues of financial sector stability and the exchange rate stability, and ensuring that there is confidence, to instill back the confidence in the market. People should have confidence to bank again freely. People should have the confidence that our policies are not going to change. So issues of policy consistency will become very paramount if we are to have the sustainability that these figures are speaking to.
Right. I would relay the same to you, Moses, except that I would add the aspect of the exchange rate. It remains a subject of much conversation, a subject of much contention. And of course, from the IMF Article 4, a recommendation for there to be an agent system at, of course, the trade of currencies within Zimbabwe. Given that you represent the retail sector of Zimbabwe, the question then would be, what would you want to see transformed where that entire matrix is concerned?
Thank you, Ben. My comment on that would be the issue of exchange rate. I would like to commend my good brother here, Persistence, and his team. I think in terms of volatility of the currency, they've done a fantastic job. There's a lot of stability in the market. Right now, if you go to RBZ with your USD invoice that you want to be paid for foreign payments and that stuff, it doesn't take 2 days for that to be done. So whatever we need to do now is to make sure that we maintain that status quo. Tick that box. Then the next box now is how are we going to improve the confidence from the transacting public? Right now, if you had to look at the banks, most banks have shifted from keeping our money in their accounts to keeping the money in the vaults, right? That's a new monster that we have in the country right now. I don't believe it's every Jack and Jill who have got money to put in a safe deposit box. We need to create a scenario whereby I should be able to go and put my money into the bank and get my money when I need it. If you look at it right now, we've agreed that the economy has gone informal. If you agree to use the word informal, the economy is now informal, right? It's now Chiwuri who is selling his Simbi, other stuff in CSO. Most of the people, they are not taking the transfer swipes, they want cash. So if I'm to take my money to bank XYZ today, $5,000, I've made myself $5,000 into my bank account, right? What does that mean tomorrow? I'm now being told you can only withdraw $1,000 per day. Meaning to say I need 5 days to get my money from the account. So in a way, the policy that we have put in place is now inhibiting me from putting money into the account. By so doing, the bank cannot lend that money because that money is not in the mainstream economy. So whoever is doing his deals is not putting money into the mainstream economy. They are putting money into different business. There are some business that have come up who are now looking after keeping our money, right? Instead of you depositing your money with CBZ as an example, you put in a vault, in a safe deposit box. But what does that mean to the mainstream economy? We are killing the economy. So my recommendation would be, let's come up with a policy that encourages us to bring in money into the bank willingly and withdraw money from the bank willingly. But the moment we can't do that, there's no reason for me to put money into the bank. If you go to the retail sector right now, the bulk of the transactions are in USD. And the bulk of the transactions are in cash, right? What does that tell you? People, they're holding on to money. If you had to look at the number of robberies being reported in the country,
week in, week out, tens of thousands of dollars are robbed.
X has been robbed of 280,000. X has been robbed of $1 million. This is what we've been told. How about those that are going unreported? So my recommendation would be, we can have significant growth if this money is to go into the banks, right? But the other side now is, why should I put my money into the bank? What is the benefit, right? If I'm to go to the bank today, I've deposited my money every day, 10,000. After 30 days, I come to the bank. Mr. Gwanyanya, my bank manager here, I need a loan. The first question is, what collateral do you have? Then I'm saying, hold on, I've been depositing money with you. So what collateral do you need? I've demonstrated capacity that I can put money to the bank. I'm running a very good business, right? So my recommendation would be, we need really to look at the policy in terms of withdrawals. We need to put a policy, because right now the amounts people are paying to have those safe deposit boxes is real money. So we need to find a way to make sure that the money is deposited back into the mainstream economy. And lastly, we need to look at how best can we capacitate the so-called informal people. I will give an example. If my good brother here, Ms. Gwanyanya, and this team are to avail 100 million, then they give 10,000 to each business proper business that is running. That means we have got 10,000 businesses that are going to be given $10,000. Assuming each business is going to employ 30 people, that's 10,000 times 30, that is 300,000. If you have to have 300,000 people looking after 3 people, that's 900,000 people. So I think we need to shift from the traditional way of giving loans, where it will be given maybe on political patronage. Let's go to those people who have demonstrated that, guys, I'm running a business, please help me. Then we put in the handbrake to now say, okay, fine, we can give you money, but make sure you deposit your money every day. So there's money in the country, but we need to find a way of creating a policy that motivates people to bring money into the mainstream economy. Then the banks can lend.
Right. The argument that's being presented here, I'm sure Persistence is eager to weigh in from Moses, is the fact that there seems to be funds that are flowing through underground channels in our economy. And it seems there seems to be two parallel economies. You've got the formal economy there, and then you've got an informal economy. You look at the growth that's taking place where the tobacco, Zimbabwe is, of course, Africa's largest tobacco producer, 330 million kilograms recorded in 2025. You look at, of course, the gold statistics that have been recorded in the first half of the year. Absolutely beyond the roof kind of figures that are coming from the country's gold sector. But the big question is this flowing through the formal channels of our country? Are these funds actually making their way into the banking system? You look at, of course, the aspect of the remittances, $2 billion on average that are coming into Zimbabwe, but they seem not to be making their way through the formal channels. What should or could be done from the central bank to address that?
It's a good observation you've made, which was also which we can also read from the census, economic census, as the economy is reclassified or rebased. We read that there is now quite a significant shift of the economy into the alternative economy. And one of the key drivers of that development was volatilities in the past. And the legacy of volatility seem to have affected us as an economy. Now that this issue seems to be under control, we expect the economy to shift back into the mainstream economy we want. But stability alone is not enough to get us to where we would want as an economy. You would also want a very strong use case for our currency. We need strong investments, incentives for that shift to happen. Fiscal and monetary, but also other non-monetary or fiscal incentives to assist us in the shift of the economy into the mainstream economy. You have noticed that in the recent past, there's been active discussions around the regulatory cost of doing business in the economy. There have been active discussions around even the tax, the duty regime in the economy. And we have seen our Minister of Finance responding positively to those concerns by the market and promising the market to look into those concerns as he announces the mid-term fiscal policy review. You may have noticed that even on the fiscal side, in terms of our local currency, the measures that would ordinarily affect the usage, increase the usage of the local currency. QPDs are now payable as a law, 50% in ZIG, but we have been promised more measures going forward. So these responsive approaches to the challenges that confronts us and which have led to the undesirable economy is what would get us to a desirable situation. So I think as we wrap our minds around those issues, it is important to reflect on the potence of the measures that the ministry is putting in place.
Now, as we wrap up, Gladys, may you speak to the aspect of there being a disparity between life in the urban areas vis-a-vis in the marginalized areas and the rural areas. It seems they're lagging very much, and that's perhaps one of the key ingredients that is producing the inequality that you spoke of earlier on in the program. In 1 minute.
Thank you very much. We need to look at the issues of digitalizing the economy. There is a lot of exclusion of the rural population, even when we look at in the financial sector, for example. So it will be important that as we digitalize the economy, even in the financial sector, we need to capacitate the rural population. Let's take the people who are running businesses in the rural areas. Let there be increased capacitation to capacitate them to be digital, because most of the time they are lagging behind because they are being excluded and they are not being included in the mainstream economy because they are lagging behind in issues of digitalization. So there needs to be a lot of capacitation in that area.
Right. Moses, lastly, the aspect of the dual system of currency that we have got in place. How sustainable is that?
It's not sustainable. We just need to create the willpower. We just need to find a way of motivating people to come back to the mainstream economy. Because if we are to crack the whip, yes, you can crack it now, but how sustainable is it? I think we need to find a way of encouraging people to come back to the mainstream economy. Thank you.
Right, I would like to thank my guest, Persistence Kwanyanya, Monetary Policy Committee member of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, Moses Chihuri, Corporate Executive, SPAR Group, and Gladys Mutsopotsi Shumbambiri, an economist. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for appearing on The Chase.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And of course, that's a wrap on The Chase tonight. Do follow us on our social media handles as InPapers TV Network, as well as at ZTN Prime. Your views and your thoughts are important to us. I'm Ibn Mabunda, the money man. Let them do what they do. When we do what we do, we mean business. Thank you for watching and have a good evening.